I think that there was something so deeply unnerving about it and distancing due to the kind of puppetry, almost clown work, but such familiar environments, and familiar routines almost going on loop of our capitalist society, still seemingly after the apocalypse. Um, it was so funny to see these almost ghosts still on loop in an institution, a system that's clearly no longer necessary, but the self-importance in maintaining routine, the self-importance and identity people get from their roles in this system takes precedence over the actual need. So I thought this was deeply creative. I loved the framing and transitions, unlike anything I've ever really seen before. And I loved that every scene and every frame had so many juxtapositional kind of ideas to it that were clearly very well thought out and allowed the images to kind of wash over me, and themes of surveillance, of purpose, of capitalist apocalypse just kind of washed over me.
It was a very strange film, which I say as a compliment. I really enjoyed the composition, cinematically. There was a really great sense of balance of sort of like a Stanley Kubrick kind of influences. A lot of it looked a little bit like Clockwork Orange. There was a lot of influences. I thought some experimental films that have a lot of historical relevancy. I don't know if that's the intent of this piece, but I thought a lot of the costume design, of the structure in terms of music and tonal balance and pacing, I thought really sort of had a lot of really strong academic and technical backdrop, which made it have a sense of form, even though the piece looked like it was quite abstract and chaotic. There was actually a very consistent sense of rhythm, and I thought of composition, and I thought worked quite well stylistically. I thought it was important to have a score and a musical approach to match this, given that obviously that there's not a linear or a clear narrative form to always consistently follow the story. But I thought the piece both sort of worked as an allegory, as a dream, a hyper-realism type of approach in multiple ways that I thought really gave it a sense of depth in an interesting sort of cinematic experience, regardless of your interpretation of what was going on.
One thing that really stuck out to me was one of the parts about service workers, and um, I think those lenses were like quite small, and I really felt like we were getting into a peek into those jobs, and it felt very reflective of how service jobs were almost invisible, with like the person moving very rapidly through the job, and also just the lens that we were getting was so tiny. And so I felt like this was a little bit of a commentary about how those jobs, service jobs, are almost invisible, and the workers in those industries are almost invisible, but the labor that is going on is quite intense and rapid, and almost like expendable is kind of the feeling. I also, I think that made me also a little bit more aware of the movements throughout the film and the commentary about, like, the greed of capitalism almost, and how it thrives off of being never ending. Capitalism is, like, never ending, and that's sort of, like, the point, is there's always more to it. And I think through these frantic movements, especially in the dilapidated, buildings where of just being run down, we're seeing all this movement there, but nobody else is there. It sort of, like, highlights, that isolation in those industries, and how almost, like, abandoned the folks are during that, and we're getting this through this act of, like, perceiving, through different, like, lenses.
One thing I noticed about the movement of all the characters is very frantic. It's almost as if the pieces have been sped up. Like it almost felt like a time lapse sort of speed. Everything except for the cats, which always seemed like it was happening in like real time. It's obviously a very experimental film in nature, which is taking a look into this parallel universe. Um, and one thing I did notice, it seems like everyone's locked into a routine, and it reminded me a lot of when I used to work in like corporate America. You know, you have your micromanagement um, manager who is obsessively, well, I guess that would be business clown, who's obsessively concerned with what everyone else has got going on and almost is finding ways to feel busy where you have everyone else feeling like they're locked into the routine that they never intended to be locked into. You have it set in and around this government building that looks like it's very much on this last leg, which really puts you into this space of sort of that corporate, like cubicle, like, you know, that type of feeling. It puts you right into that relentless capitalistic cycle and being caught up in that. And I was just very clear by just some of the distinctions that were very nostalgic to, you know, the capitalism that we've all come to accept and deal with.
I think there was a lot of really powerful imagery in this, and I think that the way that you were able to present it in such an impactful way is through this format of like clowning, like puppetry, just this surreal look at, honestly, at capitalism and at corporate America. I think you used a lot of this imagery to support these anti-capital motifs, and you're able to do it in a way that's so seamless in the style of this piece, and it's like surreal, like it's fantasy, almost surreal, because of the way you do it. I think it was just tonally, it was really, really strong, and visually, that synced up really well. This was a really interesting piece. It was very like fantastical Succession or like fantastical Severance, and just like looking in on corporate America, I think it was a really, really cool piece.
I felt like this was a big statement on finding purpose in life, finding purpose in life outside of a corporation, that each person in this atmosphere feels a sense of purpose for their own life in this environment, but it's not being fulfilled. I liked the working lunches because I felt like in the burnout part of it, and not everybody will survive. You know, why is there only 5? Because not everyone will survive. I feel like this culture is a burnout culture, and it's for who? For what? What's the purpose? So the working lunches made me laugh because it's like you can't even take a lunch break. You know, and even the person who holds the keys to this corporation, or even the management, feels like they can only get so far before they're caught in all the red tape. So I liked the visual of the red tape and the business clown getting caught in it. I just felt like there were a lot of really cool visuals, really cool visually and creative, the different lenses. I felt like I was kind of sneaking a peek into this culture by the visual, by the lens that was being used. I wrote down prisoner in a compound because that's kind of how it feels, with the person who holds these keys opening and closing the door in the beginning and the end of the day. It just feels so ridiculous, kind of, I think, shed the light on how ridiculous that is.
That mundane repetition of office life, that's a very harrowing and suffocating kind of feeling. The fact that all these people, they kind of look like plague doctors, but it's in a way where it's meant to remove your identity, remove your semblance of who you are. The ending where everything comes crashing down, basically that destruction of what is considered the status quo. Reading the description definitely helped me a lot in actually noticing a lot of these things, and seeing more about this overarching message, which I'm very grateful for.